was designed to test people between the ages of 12 and 16.
It was designed to, you're right.
And Dr. Couples, you would agree that there is still disagreement within the psychological community about diagnosing any minors with psychopathy.
Absolutely. There are certain elements of the community who disagree with the idea of psychopathy in children. However, the majority of the community does agree with my point of view. That's why we have the PI-J test.
Just to be clear, there are some people who don't think that minors should be diagnosed with psychopathy,
Yes, you're right.
especially when that diagnosis is coming to someone under the age of 12.
Yes, there are some parts of the community who think that.
Specifically about them being under 12.
Yes, there are some parts of the community who think that.
And Dr. Couples, you know that Jesse Duran was only 11 years old when you made this diagnosis.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Couples, I'd like to talk about these factors that you brought up on direct about how exactly you diagnose someone. And now the PIAJ test goes to a scale between 0 and 20,
Yes,
20 being the highest,
you're right.
meaning that that's the number that would show almost consistently that someone does have psychopathy.
That's not entirely right.
You need to score, the highest you can score is a 20,
The highest possible is a 20, you're right.
and the lowest possible score for a diagnosis of psychopathy is a 12.
You're right.
Dr. Couples, you diagnosed Jesse Duran with a 12 on that scale, is that correct?
That's right. That medically shows that Jesse Duran had psychopathy.
Now, Dr. Couples, you'd have to agree with me that this test can be subjective.
It can be subjective, you're right.
So you might score someone a 1.
Yes.
Someone else could give them a 2 for that same trait.
I think there are very restrictive guidelines on the test that prevent something like that from happening.
Well, regardless of what you think, Dr. Couples, it's a possibility that you could score someone differently than another psychologist.
Sure.
So it's possible that when you gave Jesse Duran a 2 in persistent aggression, someone else could have given him a 1.
I don't think that would be possible based on the evidence I looked at.
But it is possible that someone may have disagreed with your analysis.
Not with the evidence I had. No, ma'am.
Dr. Couples, you can't be telling me that you know exactly what every other psychologist in your field would do with this test.
You're right, I don't. But with the general guidelines that the psychological community published in the PI-J test, it's a pretty clear piece of evidence that the persistent aggression would be a 2. I don't think that's up for debate, ma'am.
Well, let's talk about cruelty to animals specifically. Now, there were a couple of pieces of information that you relied upon when coming to getting Jesse Duran a 1 there.
Yes, I was pretty generous with the information I had. I had evidence that he tried to flush a cat down the toilet, and that he threw pine cones at a squirrel. I think that was enough to show a 1.
Let's talk about that. That incident with the cat that you talked about, Jesse Duran was 5 in that incident, wasn't he?
Yes.
An incident from Jesse Duran's 5-year-old life is one of the things that you used to diagnose him as a psychopath.
You're right. Psychopathy manifests itself at very young ages. It can happen starting from birth all the way till you're older. It doesn't matter at the time or when that happens.
Just to be clear, you used an instance of when he was 5 years old to put toward that trait of cruelty to animals.
Ma'am, most 5-year-olds don't try to flush cats down toilets.
Dr. Couples, to direct you back to my question, when he was 5 years old, that is one of the things that you used as your evidence.
You're right.
And now the second thing that you used was an instance of Jesse Duran tossing a pine cone at a squirrel.
You're right. He was doing it with another friend. The friend expressed remorse about it. However, he did not. He didn't feel sorry at all.
Dr. Couples, I'm not talking about any kind of remorse or empathy. I'm talking about cruelty to animals. One symptom of that you're telling us today is a small child throwing a pine cone at a squirrel.
Yes, that's cruelty.
You used that testimony to try to diagnose Jesse Duran, an 11-year-old, as a psychopath.
You're right.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right.
No redirect, Your Honor. May Dr. Couples step down?
Yes.
And Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff closes our case in chief, and if time permits, we'd ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess.
Let's go with 5.
Yes, Your Honor.